Jesse Pomeroy, the Boston child killer. Jesse Pomeroy may not be the most notorious serial killer in history, but he is certainly among the most brutal. Pomeroy is known for 2 confirmed murders, and those who survived his attacks endured extreme and sadistic torture. What makes his case even more chilling is that he began killing at just 12 years old and was sentenced to death by the age of 16. He was nicknamed the Marble-Eyed Killer. Early life and family background. Jesse was born in 1859 in Boston to Charles and Ruth Pomeroy, members of the lower middle class. The Pomeroy family was far from happy. Charles was an alcoholic with a volatile temper. For Jesse and his brother, outings with their father often meant a beating. Charles would strip the boys naked before punishing them, which led to a deep-seated association in Jesse's mind between pain, punishment, and sexual gratification. Later, Jesse would recreate these scenes while torturing his young victims. The Pomeroy family did not keep pets, as any attempt to do so resulted in the animals' deaths. Ruth longed for lovebirds but was deterred by past tragedies involving pets. After witnessing Jesse torturing a neighbor's kitten, Ruth gave up any thoughts of having pets in the house. Progression to human victims. Like many killers who start with animals, Jesse quickly grew bored with this form of cruelty and began targeting people. Naturally, he chose victims who were smaller and weaker than himself. His first victim was William Payne. In December 1871, 2 men passing by a small house on Powderhorn Hill in South Boston heard faint cries. Upon entering, they were shocked to find 4-year-old Billy Payne hanging by his wrists from a ceiling beam. The nearly unconscious child had deep red scars across his back. The police could not get any useful information from Billy, leaving them to hope it was an isolated incident. Unfortunately, it was not. In February 1872, Jesse lured 7-year-old Tracy Hayden to the Powderhorn area with the promise of showing him soldiers. Once in a secluded spot, Jesse bound Tracy and began torturing him. Tracy had his front teeth knocked out, his nose broken, and his eyes bruised with blood. Tracy could only tell the police that his attacker had chestnut hair and had threatened to cut off his penis. This vague description did little to help prevent future attacks, but it was clear that the perpetrator was dangerously unstable and that another similar incident was just a matter of time. In early spring 1872, Jesse lured 8-year-old Robert Meyer to his hideout, convincing him that he would take him to the circus. After undressing Robert, Pomeroy beat him with a stick and forced him to recite curses. Later, Robert told the police that his tormentor had masturbated during the torture. After reaching orgasm, Jesse released Robert but threatened to kill him if he told anyone about the incident. The hunt for the killer. Boston parents launched a manhunt for the predator. They warned their children not to talk to strangers, interrogated hundreds of teenagers, and organized several raids. But the pervert evaded capture repeatedly. Jesse's next attack took place in mid-July in the same Powderhorn cabin. 7-year-old George Pratt, whom Jesse had promised 25 cents for helping with chores, was treated in the same brutal manner as Robert, with additional cruelty such as biting a chunk out of his cheek, slashing his skin with nails, and stabbing him with a long sewing needle. Pomeroy even attempted to gouge out George's eye, but the boy managed to avoid it. As a final act of cruelty, Jesse bit a piece of flesh from George's buttock before fleeing. Within a month, Jesse kidnapped 6-year-old Harry Austin, subjecting him to the same scenario. This time, Jesse brought a knife, stabbing Harry in his sides and between his collarbones. He tried to cut off the boy's penis but was interrupted and ran away. Just 6 days later, Jesse lured 7-year-old Joseph Kennedy to a swamp, cut him with a knife, and forced him to recite a perverted version of a prayer, substituting scripture with profanity. When Joseph refused, Pomeroy slashed his face with the knife and washed it with salty water. Another 6 days later, a 5-year-old boy was found tied to a post near the railroad tracks in South Boston. He said he had been lured there by an older boy who promised to show him soldiers. The most valuable clue came from Robert Gould, who told the police that his attacker was a boy with a white eye. Pomeroy's right eye was indeed completely white, both the iris and pupil, possibly due to cataracts or viral infection. Thus, Jesse earned the nickname the Marble-Eyed Killer, which became known throughout Boston. Capture and trial. As is often the case with serial killers, Pomeroy was arrested almost by accident. On September 21, 1872, police came to Jesse's school with Joseph Kennedy, but Joseph could not identify his tormentor. For some unknown reason, Jesse walked into a police station on his way home from school. Since he had never shown much remorse for his crimes, it's possible that he saw this as part of his game with the police. Joseph happened to be at the station when Jesse arrived. Seeing his victim, Jesse turned to leave, but Joseph had already spotted him and pointed him out to the police. Pomeroy was locked up and interrogated, but he stubbornly denied his guilt. It was only when threatened with a 100-year prison sentence that he confessed to everything. Justice was swift. The court sentenced Jesse to a reform school in Westboro, where he was to remain until he turned 18. However, he was released on parole fairly quickly and, within 6 weeks, resumed his old activities. On March 18, 1874, Jesse, then running a sewing shop with his mother Ruth, lured 10-year-old Katie Curran into the store. She asked if they had notebooks, and Jesse suggested she go to the basement, where there was a shop that might sell them. Once downstairs, Katie realized she had been deceived, but it was too late. Pomeroy silenced her with his hand and slit her throat. He dragged her body to the toilet and covered it with stones. When her body was discovered, her head was completely smashed, and her upper body had decomposed to the point where it was impossible to determine the exact wounds. However, it was clear that Katie's abdomen and genitalia had been mutilated with particular brutality. Katie's disappearance caused a panic. Her mother, Mary, went searching for her. A store clerk where Katie had inquired about the notebook told Mary that he had sent the girl to the Pomeroy shop. Hearing this, Mary nearly fainted. She had heard about Jesse. On her way to the Pomeroy shop, she met a police captain and shared her concerns. The captain reassured her that Jesse posed no threat. He had supposedly undergone rehabilitation at the reform school and had never attacked girls. Mary was sent home with assurances that her daughter was likely just lost and would be found within a day. Jesse's craving for violence did not subside. Despite the risk of capture, he continued to lure children into abandoned houses. Most potential victims were smart enough to refuse his offers, but 5-year-old Harry Field was not. Jesse asked him to show him the way to Vernon Street, promising a nickel. After leading Pomeroy to the street, Harry asked for his reward, and Jesse shoved him into an alley and ordered him to be quiet. Searching for a suitable execution site, Pomeroy found a secluded spot, but luck was on Harry's side that day. Jesse's neighbor, who knew about his reputation, passed by. The boy screamed at Pomeroy, and while they argued, little Harry escaped. The next child was not so fortunate. In April 1874, 4-year-old Horace Millen went to the bakery for a cake when he met Jesse, who invited him to shop together. After buying the cake, Horace shared it with Jesse, who then offered to take him to the port to see the steamboats. Jesse had decided to kill Horace as soon as he saw the child. He chose a secluded spot where he would not be disturbed. Reaching the swamp near the port, he suggested they rest, and as soon as the boy sat down, Jesse slashed his throat. Frustrated by his failure to kill the child immediately, he viciously continued to strike him at random. Police counted numerous wounds on the boy's arms and forearms, indicating that Horace was still alive and struggling for most of the attack. Eventually, Jesse managed to slit his victim's throat, but did not stop, continuing to strike, mostly in the groin area. He gouged out the child's right eye through the closed eyelid, and investigators later counted at least 18 wounds on Horace's chest. The boy's body was discovered a few hours later, and by evening, Horace was identified. The most logical suspect was Pomeroy, who was immediately brought to the station and bombarded with questions. Where had he been all day? Who could have seen him? Did he know Horace Millen? Where did the fresh scratches on his face come from? Jesse answered all questions in detail but could not explain his whereabouts from 11 to 3. After the interrogation, Pomeroy was taken to his cell, where he fell asleep immediately. Meanwhile, the police took plaster casts of the footprints found at the crime scene. The pattern on the casts matched the tread of Jesse's shoes exactly, leading to his arrest. However, he continued to deny his involvement. "You can't prove anything," Pomeroy insisted. Captain Henry Dyer used a clever tactic. He suggested to Jesse that he visit the morgue to view Horace's body, saying that if he was innocent, he had nothing to fear. Reluctantly, Pomeroy agreed, though he claimed he didn't want to go. The detectives took him to the undertaker anyway. Upon seeing the mutilated body of young Horace, Pomeroy broke down and confessed to the murder. He told the police he had no idea how serious his crime was. "I regret doing it," he sobbed. "Please don't tell my mom." The newspapers spread the news of the serial killer's capture throughout the East Coast. No one remembered the presumption of innocence. Everyone unanimously considered Jesse guilty. On December 10, 1874, the court also found him guilty. After the verdict, it was merely a matter of the governor's signature. Pomeroy was sentenced to death. However, Governor William Gaston refused to sign. The gubernatorial council voted for the death penalty twice, but Gaston was adamant. It was only on the third vote that the council agreed to commute the sentence to life imprisonment, and only then did the governor approve the decision. On the evening of September 7, 1876, Jesse was transferred from the Suffolk County Jail to the Charlestown Prison, where he was assigned to a solitary cell. Pomeroy was 16 years and 9 months old. While in prison, Jesse claimed to have learned to read in several languages. Whether this was true or not is uncertain, but a psychiatrist confirmed that Pomeroy had achieved a respectable proficiency in German. Additionally, he wrote poetry, studied law books, and spent decades drafting petitions for clemency. According to a 1914 psychiatric report, he had made over 10 escape attempts during his incarceration, demonstrating great inventiveness and persistence, unprecedented in prison history. In 1917, Pomeroy's sentence was partially modified, allowing him some privileges reserved for life sentence inmates. Initially, Jesse resisted, insisting on at least a pardon. Eventually, he accepted the circumstances and even participated in a prison talent show. In 1929, Pomeroy, by then in poor health and aged, he was 70 years old, was transferred to the Bridgewater Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where he died on September 29, 1932.